Ridgeway Construction Headquarters, Pittsburgh. Late afternoon sun on the Allegheny. Fourth floor conference room. Megan Trent set her pen down on the termination form. Done. Douglas Kern sat beside her, nodded once. He poured 2 glasses. Megan picked hers up. They touched rims, the sound sharp in the empty room. 4 floors below, Adam Collier walked past the front desk for the last time. Toolbox in one hand. Badge already on the counter. Nobody looked up. The lobby doors closed behind him. Parking lot. He set the toolbox in the bed of his truck. Behind him, the Allegheny pedestrian bridge caught the last of the sun. 4th floor. Megan watched the pickup pull out. Took a sip. Turned back to her desk. She just fired the man who built the bridge outside her window, and she doesn't know it yet. Stay? Someone is about to ask. That evening, Adam Collier pulled into his driveway in Pittsburgh's Brookline neighborhood and sat in the truck for a full minute before cutting the engine. The toolbox stayed in the bed. He left it there. Inside, Jenna was at the kitchen table. 9 years old, quiet by nature, bent over a jigsaw puzzle. A 1,000-piece coastal landscape she'd been working on for 2 weeks. She was close. Only a handful of pieces left in the corner where the sky met the water. Adam came through the side door, hung his jacket on the hook where it always went, and sat down across from her. He didn't say anything, just picked up a piece, turned it twice, and set it into place. Jenna glanced at him, then back at the puzzle. She pushed the box lid closer to his side of the table so he could see the reference image. The kitchen smelled like the frozen pizza she'd heated up herself. The oven was still warm. 8 years earlier, Adam had been sitting across from a different table, Walter Price's desk at Ridgeway Construction, a company Walter had built from a 2-man crew in 2006 into one of Pittsburgh's most respected mid-size firms. Walter was 64 now, mostly retired, living outside Philadelphia. But back then he was still running the operation himself, and he had called Adam in for a single reason: the Allegheny pedestrian bridge. The city had approved the project, Ridgeway had won the bid, and Walter needed a structural engineer who could carry the full design. Adam was 31, licensed PE, quiet but precise. Walter hired him on a handshake. Adam spent 3 years on that bridge. He designed the cable stays, calculated the load ratings for wind shear and ice buildup, walked every pour, checked every weld, stamped every certification with his PE number. When the bridge opened in 2019, it became a symbol of Pittsburgh's riverfront revival. Ridgeway's name went national. Adam's name went on the engineering drawings. Nowhere else. His wife passed the following year. No long illness. It happened in a span of weeks that rearranged the rest of his life. Her family was in Pittsburgh. Jenna was 3. He stayed. Then in 2021, Walter stepped back. He named Megan Trent, his VP of Operations, sharp, data-driven, 34 at the time, as CEO. And he brought in Douglas Kern from the outside as COO to handle the operational side, while Megan found her footing. Douglas moved fast. Within 6 months, he dissolved the in-house project engineering department and centralized all technical decisions under his own office. Adam's title went from senior project engineer to field coordinator. Not a firing. A demotion folded into reorganization language. Adam didn't fight it. His wife had just died. The field gave him what he needed: concrete tasks, visible results, no meetings. He showed up, checked deliveries, walked job sites, went home to Jenna. The reporting chain at Ridgeway was simple. Field staff reported to the COO, not the CEO. Adam didn't have Megan's email. He didn't sit in her meetings. Douglas Kern was his ceiling. 6 months before the termination, Adam noticed something on the active sites. Materials arriving didn't match the bid documents. Steel deliveries coming in 15 to 20% light, but invoices going through accounting at full quantity. He flagged it to Douglas 3 times. The first verbal, the next 2 in writing. Douglas called them clerical errors. After the 3rd report, Douglas told him to stop. 2 weeks later, Douglas walked into Megan's office with a disciplinary file. 3 incident reports, each one accusing Adam of insubordination and refusal to follow site protocols. Each signed by Douglas alone. No witness statements. No HR review. The HR manager was on extended leave, and the deputy position had been vacant for 5 months. Ridgeway was a mid-size firm. On a good day, the HR department was 2 people. Douglas framed it as urgent. Liability exposure. A problem employee creating risk on active sites. He put the termination form in front of Megan and told her it needed to happen before the end of the week. Megan signed it. She trusted her COO. She didn't pull the project files, didn't check the incident reports against site records, didn't interview the project managers Douglas claimed had complained. Adam Collier was out before he ever found a way past Douglas Kern. 3 weeks after the firing, the lobby of Ridgeway Construction looked the same as it always did. Project photos along the far wall. The receptionist behind the desk. Morning light slanting through the glass doors. Walter Price walked in without an appointment. He hadn't been to the Pittsburgh office in over a year. He lived outside Philadelphia now, kept his chairman emeritus title, attended the occasional board call. But he still talked to people at Ridgeway, a project manager he'd hired in the early days, a site foreman who sent fishing photos every fall. One of them had mentioned, casually, 3 days earlier, that Adam Collier had been let go. Walter didn't call Megan. He didn't send an email. He drove 4 hours on a Tuesday morning and walked through the front door without telling anyone he was coming. He crossed the lobby without stopping at the desk, went straight to the project wall, and stood in front of the Allegheny Bridge photograph. A large format print in a dark frame. The bridge at dawn, cables catching the first horizontal light, the river silver beneath it. Walter reached up and touched the edge of the frame, held his hand there for a moment, the way a man touches something he's proud of and afraid to lose. Megan came downstairs. She'd been notified by the receptionist, had assumed this was about the 20th anniversary gala next month. Walter's attendance was the centerpiece. She'd planned to walk him through the event layout over coffee. Walter didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the bridge. I need to see Adam Collier. Megan's step slowed. That name. She'd signed the form herself, 3 weeks ago, in the conference room upstairs. She opened the personnel system on her phone. Terminated. Insubordination. He's no longer with the company, she said. Walter turned from the photograph. His face was calm, but his voice had weight. That man designed every cable, every anchor, every joint on that bridge. I hired him myself. He looked directly at her. Where is he? The question hung in the lobby between them. Megan didn't answer. She looked past Walter, through the glass, at the bridge spanning the Allegheny in the morning light. She saw it every day from her office window. Had seen it for 2 years. She had never once asked who designed it. Back upstairs, she pulled the original project file for the Allegheny Bridge. 200 pages. Every technical drawing, stamped and signed, Adam Collier, P.E. Every structural certification, every load rating, every cable tension spec, every foundation analysis. One name, repeated across every page, in the same precise hand. She called Douglas into her office and asked him directly. Why didn't she know the man she'd just fired was the lead engineer on Ridgeway's most important project? Douglas leaned back, crossed his arms. He was part of a team, Megan. He's been underperforming for years. The bridge was a long time ago. Megan watched his face while he talked. Then she opened the disciplinary file, the one Douglas had brought her 3 weeks earlier. She read each incident report carefully for the first time. 3 accusations. 3 signatures, all Douglas. No corroboration. No HR stamp. No project manager statement. No supporting documentation of any kind. She closed the folder and looked out the window. Walter was still downstairs. She could see the top of his head through the atrium glass. He was standing exactly where she'd left him, in front of the bridge, waiting to see what she would do. The following morning, Megan Trent drove to Adam Collier's house in Brookline. She didn't route it through Douglas. She didn't notify HR. She pulled the home address from his personnel file, got in her car at 7:45, and went. Adam opened the front door in a flannel shirt and work boots, the kind of clothes a man wears when he has nowhere in particular to be. He was taller than Megan had pictured from the personnel photo, broader across the shoulders. He looked at her the way people look at someone they didn't expect and aren't sure they want to see. No hostility, but nothing that resembled welcome, either. Megan introduced herself. Adam said he knew who she was. He'd seen her name at the bottom of the termination letter. She didn't ease into it. Were you insubordinate? Adam leaned against the doorframe, folded his arms. Somewhere behind him in the house, a television was on at low volume. He didn't invite her in, and she didn't ask. I noticed the deliveries were short, he said. Steel, rebar, concrete batch counts. 15, 20% below the bid specs on 3 different projects. but the invoices going through accounting matched the full quantities. I reported it to Douglas. That's who I report to. Field coordinator goes through the COO. I don't have your email. I'm not in your meetings. I'm not on your floor. How many times did you report it? 3. First one verbal. Next 2 in writing. Dated. Detailed. What did he say? First time, clerical error. Second time, he said it was handled. Third time he told me to stop and said the project managers had filed complaints about me. Adam paused. I checked with 2 of them afterward. They hadn't filed anything. Megan stood on his porch with the morning traffic passing behind her on the residential street. A neighbor across the way was loading a car. Normal Tuesday. She felt the weight of what she'd done settling into a shape she couldn't argue with. The chain of command had worked exactly as it was designed, and it had failed precisely because of who sat at the top of it. She asked if he had documentation. Adam said he'd photographed every delivery receipt on every active site for the past 6 months. Standard practice for a field coordinator, tracking deliveries was the job description. He'd matched each receipt to the corresponding bid sheet on his own laptop. The shortfall was consistent across every project. Systematic, not clerical. Would you be willing to show me? Adam studied her for a long moment. The porch boards creaked under his weight as he shifted. This was the CEO of the company that had fired him 3 weeks ago, standing on his front steps at 8 in the morning, asking questions no one in the building had bothered to ask while he still worked there. He stepped to the side and left the door open. Not quite an invitation, but not a refusal either. The numbers were worse than Megan had expected. Adam's laptop held 6 months of photographs, delivery receipts, truck manifests, packing slips, each tagged with the project name and the date. He'd built a simple spreadsheet matching bid quantities against actual deliveries across 3 major projects. The pattern was clean and ugly. Materials ordered at full spec, invoiced at full price, delivered at 80 to 85%. The gap wasn't random. It tracked. The estimated shortfall across those 3 projects came to $1.4 million. Money that Ridgway had paid out for materials that never reached a job site. Megan sat at Adam's kitchen table, scrolling through the spreadsheet in silence. This wasn't a clerical error. This was structure. She authorized an independent audit that same afternoon, hired out of her discretionary budget as CEO, no routing through Douglas or his office. No notice given. She asked Adam to come back as a technical consultant for the duration of the audit. Nobody at Ridgway understood the project files, the bid architecture, or the field conditions better than he did. Adam agreed. Not because she'd persuaded him. Because the discrepancy was still there, and he was the kind of man who couldn't leave a wrong number standing. The following week, he walked her through an active job site on the north end of the city. Late morning, hard hats, safety vests, the grind of machinery in the middle distance. Adam moved through the site like he'd been born on one, checking footing depths, scanning rebar spacing, reading the ground the way some people read faces. He stopped at a stack of steel-eyed beams beside a half-finished foundation wall. Bid spec calls for 40, he said. Count them. Megan counted. 33. She stood in the middle of that construction site and looked up. The Allegheny pedestrian bridge was visible from where they stood, a different angle than her office window. Lower. Closer. She could see the underside of the deck, the cable stays fanning out from the towers, the welds she'd never noticed from her 4th-floor view. Adam stood beside her, hands in his vest pockets. He didn't say anything. The bridge hung above them, 7 years old, still carrying every load the city had put on it. He didn't need to explain what it meant. He'd built it. She was just now learning to see it. The independent audit took 4 weeks. The auditors, a forensic accounting team from a firm in Philadelphia that had no ties to Ridgway, went through every active and recently completed project in Douglas Kern's tenure as COO. What they found confirmed everything Adam had documented and extended it further than either of them had expected. Phantom line items appeared on at least 5 major projects over a 2-year span. Not random overcharges or rounding errors. Structured inflation, 12 to 18% above actual costs, inserted as fabricated material quantities, subcontractor fees for work never performed, equipment rentals for machines that never arrived on site. Every inflated bid used the same foundation, Adam Collier's original cost modeling template, the one he developed as a project engineer, the one Walter Price had personally reviewed and adopted as Ridgway's standard estimating tool. Douglas had taken the template, kept its structure, kept its credibility, and layered phantom costs on top. The numbers looked legitimate because the baseline was legitimate. Adam's precision had become the camouflage. Megan sat with that realization for a long time in her office, the audit binder open on her desk, the bridge visible through her window in the fading light. Douglas hadn't just stolen from the company. He'd used Adam's work, Adam's reputation for accuracy, the very precision that had built Ridgway's name, as the mask. There was more. The audit flagged a vendor called Kearney Industrial Supply, the company receiving the largest payments across all 5 projects. A corporate filing search revealed that Kearney was partially owned through a holding company registered to Douglas Kern. He wasn't just inflating bids. He was routing the inflated payments to an entity he controlled. 3 consecutive nights, Megan and Adam worked in the Ridgway conference room, the same room where she'd signed his termination, though neither of them mentioned it. The security guard let them in after hours. The cleaning crew worked around them. They spread bid documents across the table beside delivery logs, vendor payment records, and bank statements until the surface disappeared under paper. Laptops open, screens glowing, coffee cups going cold between them, refilled and forgotten again. Adam walked her through the technical architecture of the fraud, how to read a bid sheet against a field receipt, where the line items had been padded, which project phases were most vulnerable to phantom billing. He explained it the way he did everything: patient, precise, unhurried. No condescension. No shortcuts. Megan took notes in a legal pad. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pretend to understand things she didn't. Past 11 on the 3rd night, they were both leaning over the same spreadsheet printout, tracing a suspect line item with their fingers. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved. The moment held, 3 seconds, 5, and then Adam reached for the next page, and the contact broke. Megan stayed still a beat longer. She noticed his left hand on the table. No ring. Just a pale line where one had been. She turned back to the numbers. But something had shifted in the room that hadn't been there before. Then she found something that stopped the audit cold. One project included a materials approval form bearing Adam Collier's signature, authorizing a concrete delivery that the auditors had confirmed never took place. Adam's name, in what looked like his handwriting, on a phantom purchase. Except Adam had never signed it. He'd been on a different job site that entire week. The delivery logs proved it. The signature was forged. Someone had put Adam's name on a fraudulent document, and there was only one person with motive and access to do it. The completed audit report landed on Walter Price's desk on a Tuesday morning in the small office he kept on Ridgway's 4th floor. Total confirmed discrepancy across 5 projects, $1.87 million. Every dollar routed through 3 vendors in which Douglas Kern held direct or indirect financial interest. Phantom line items built on Adam Collier's cost template, a forged signature on at least one materials approval form, and a fabricated disciplinary file, 3 unsigned, uncorroborated incident reports, used to remove the only employee who had noticed. Megan presented the findings in person. She sat across from Walter in the small office, the audit binder between them, and walked through it page by page. The numbers, the vendor ownership filings, the forged materials approval, the timeline, Adam's 3 written reports to Douglas, each one dated, each one ignored, and the termination that followed 2 weeks after the last. She was methodical. She didn't editorialize. She let the documents speak the way Adam would have, with precision and without excuse. Walter listened in his chair by the window, hands folded, face still. He didn't interrupt. He didn't flip ahead. When Megan finished, the room was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the ventilation system and, faintly, the hum of traffic on the bridge outside. Then Walter asked one question. How did it get this far? Megan didn't look away from him. I fired Adam without checking, she said. I signed the form Douglas put in front of me. I didn't pull the project files. I didn't talk to the people Douglas said had complained. I didn't ask HR to review the case because Douglas said it was urgent, and I believed him. She paused. The numbers he delivered every quarter, the cost savings, they were built on this. And the man who caught it was the man I let walk out of the building. Walter looked at her for a long time. The river light moved slowly across the ceiling tiles above him. His expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted, the way a man recalculates a structure when he finds a crack he hadn't expected. Then he said, quietly, I know. That's why I asked where he was. The words landed. Megan sat with them. Walter hadn't driven 4 hours from Philadelphia for the anniversary gala. He hadn't come to review the event layout or walk through the catering plan. He'd come because a project manager he'd trusted for 20 years had mentioned, in a 2-line text message, that Adam Collier had been terminated. And Walter had wanted to see, in person, face to face, what his CEO would do about it. Whether she would investigate or accept. Whether she would own the mistake or construct a reason it wasn't one. This had been his test. Not the audit. Not the fraud. Not the numbers. Her. After Walter left the room, Megan stayed. She didn't move to her own office. She sat in his chair by the window and looked out at the Allegheny Bridge, cables catching the late afternoon light, deck clean and level above the dark water. She'd looked at this bridge every working day for 2 years. She'd seen it in the annual report, on the company website, on the easel in the lobby. She had never once connected it to a person. Now she saw the hand that built it. A specific man, with a name she'd read on a termination form without stopping to wonder who he was. A man who had spent 3 years calculating thermal expansion coefficients and cable tension tolerances and weld specifications. And she had signed a single page and erased him from the building. She picked up her phone and called Adam. She didn't walk him through the audit results. She didn't frame it as business. I should have asked more questions before I signed that form, she said. I didn't. That's on me. Silence on the line. Long enough that she could hear the ambient sound of his house. A clock. Or maybe the refrigerator compressor cycling. Then Adam's voice, unhurried. What happens now? Douglas goes. And I'd like you to come back. Not as a consultant. He didn't answer right away. She sat with the silence and didn't fill it. After a moment, he said he'd think about it. She said that was fair. And she meant it. The board meeting was held 4 days later. Megan had spent 3 of them preparing. She presented the audit report in full, the phantom line items, the vendor payment trail, the holding company linking Douglas Kern to Kearney Industrial Supply. She showed the forged materials approval form bearing Adam Collier's name. She displayed Adam's delivery photographs side by side with the bid documents. 40 I-beams on paper, 33 on the ground. Invoiced as 40. Douglas sat at the far end of the table in the charcoal suit he always wore to board meetings. His posture was straight, hands flat on the table, the look of a man who had rehearsed his rebuttal and was waiting for his turn. When Megan finished, he spoke without standing. Costs fluctuated, he said. The construction market had shifted materially over the past 2 years. Labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, rising material prices. The discrepancies Megan had identified were vendor-side billing errors compounded by incomplete field reporting from an employee who had been reassigned due to performance issues. Adam Collier, he said, was a disgruntled former employee with a personal grievance, a man who'd been demoted for cause and couldn't accept it. He delivered it cleanly, professionally, the kind of explanation that sounds reasonable in a boardroom if you don't have the numbers in front of you. Megan let him finish. She didn't interrupt. She didn't react. When he was done, she clicked to the next slide, the Kearney Industrial Supply corporate filing from the Pennsylvania Secretary of State's office. Douglas Kern's name was listed on the primary registration, not buried in a subsidiary, not masked by a trust structure. His name, in black ink on a state document, on the company that had received $614,000 in Ridgeway payments over 22 months. The room shifted. 2 board members leaned forward. One set down his pen. Douglas looked at the screen for a long 3 seconds, then looked at the table. He didn't speak again. Megan put up the final slide, Adam's delivery photographs, side by side with the bid documents. 40 I-beams on paper, 33 on the concrete floor of an active job site. Invoiced at 40. Walter Price was the last to address the board. He stood slowly, hands at his sides. He didn't raise his voice. He said he'd built Ridgeway Construction over 20 years on one thing, the certainty that when Ridgeway put a number on a bid, that number was real. He said that certainty was the reason clients came back, the reason banks extended credit, the reason the city had trusted them with the bridge. And he said Douglas had taken that certainty, something that had taken 2 decades to build, and used it as camouflage. He sat down. The room was still. The board voted. 6-0. Douglas held the title of COO. He was not a board member. He had no vote and no voice in the decision. He stood, straightened his jacket. looked around the room. 7 faces, not one of them looking back. He picked up his folder from the table, buttoned his jacket with precise fingers, and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. The conference room was the same one where Megan had signed Adam's termination 5 weeks and 4 days earlier. Same table, same chairs, same view of the Allegheny Bridge through the window. The last time she'd been in this room with purpose, she'd clinked glasses with the man who had just walked out. She stayed after the others filed out. Douglas's chair was still pulled back from the table at an angle, the leather still warm. She looked at it for a moment, then past it, through the glass. The bridge was lit by the afternoon sun. It looked exactly the way it had 5 weeks ago. But she didn't. The following week, with Douglas's departure finalized and his records transferred to Ridgway's outside counsel, Megan called Adam and asked him to come by the office. Not for a meeting, not for paperwork. She wanted to talk. They met in the Ridgway lobby after hours. The building was empty. Cleaning crew had already come and gone. The marble floor was still damp near the entrance. The project photographs on the far wall were lit by the security accent lights, each one glowing faintly in the dim lobby. Megan offered Adam the position of Director of Project Engineering. His real title, the one that matched what he'd actually been doing for Ridgway since 2018, designing, certifying, and protecting the structural integrity of every project the company built. Adam didn't say yes. He stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the project wall. 3 years in the field had carved a groove. He knew the rhythm, job sites at first light, delivery checks, the quiet satisfaction of working with measurements and steel and concrete instead of conference rooms and reporting structures. Going back to a director role meant visibility. Org charts. Decisions made in glass-walled rooms where people watched how you sat and what you said and who you agreed with. "I'm not sure I want to be in the building again," he said. "Not like that." Megan didn't push. She leaned against the lobby wall, arms folded, and waited. Then she asked the question she'd been carrying since the first morning she'd sat in his kitchen. "Why didn't you fight it? 3 years ago, when Douglas moved you to field coordinator, you designed the bridge. You had every reason to push back. You could have gone to Walter directly." Adam looked at the bridge photograph. Third from the left. The cables, the deck, the water beneath. Quiet for a long time. "My wife had just died," he said. "I didn't have anything left to fight with. I needed to go somewhere in the morning and come home at night and know that Jenna would be there at the table. That was all I could handle. The field gave me that. I could see what I'd done at the end of every shift. No politics. No arguments about credit or titles or who reports to who. Just the work. Did the pour set right? Did the delivery match? Is the rebar spacing what the drawing says?" He paused. His hand came out of his pocket and rested on the edge of the nearest easel frame. "The work was the one thing I could still keep straight." Megan didn't share her own version, but she recognized it. The weight of stepping into a role bigger than your certainty and spending the next 2 years trusting someone else's confidence because your own wasn't there yet. She understood what it cost to admit that, and she understood what it meant that he was telling her now. They stood in the empty lobby. The bridge photograph glowed between them. The building was silent except for the hum of the HVAC system cycling somewhere in the walls. Adam said he needed one night. There was someone he wanted to check with first. That evening, Adam and Jenna sat at the kitchen table. The coastal puzzle was finished, framed, actually, leaning against the wall by the refrigerator. A new one was spread in front of them. Mountain landscape. Twice as many pieces. Jenna worked the edges the way she always did, border first, then sky. Adam sorted middle pieces by color without looking at the box lid. They didn't talk much. They never needed to. At one point, Jenna stopped. She looked at her father across the table. Something was different about him tonight. She couldn't have named it, but she saw it. She picked up a puzzle piece from her side, blue-gray, a fragment of mountain sky, and slid it across the table toward him. Adam picked it up, turned it once, and fitted it into the section he'd been building. It clicked and clean. The next morning, he called Megan, told her he'd take it. He drove to Ridgway headquarters and parked in the same spot he'd used for 3 years, far end of the lot, near the service entrance. Old habit. He got out, looked at the front doors, and walked toward them instead. The security guard recognized him, gave him a nod and a quiet half-smile. Adam nodded back. He crossed the lobby to the project wall. The Allegheny Bridge photograph hung where it always hung, Third from the left, eye level, morning light falling across the glass. He stopped. For 3 years, he'd walked past this wall every morning on his way to the service elevator without breaking stride. Today he stood still and looked at it. The cables, the towers, the deck he'd calculated to carry 1,200 pedestrians at peak load. His bridge, still there. 4th floor. Megan stood at her office window, coffee in hand. She watched Adam cross the lobby below. The same window, the same angle as the afternoon she'd watched his truck pull out of the parking lot. Same glass, same frame. But the man was walking in, not walking away. And this time, she knew his name. That afternoon, Jenna came by after school. Adam met her in the lobby, and they rode the elevator to the 4th floor together. He took her out to the east balcony, a small terrace nobody used because it faced the river instead of the street. The Allegheny Bridge was directly in front of them, close enough to see the individual cables, the expansion joints, the anchor plates at the tower bases. The late afternoon light turned the steel warm. Jenna leaned on the railing and looked at it. Then she looked at her father. He didn't explain what it was. She didn't ask. The wind came off the river, steady and clean, and they stood there until the light moved off the cables and the steel went silver in the shade. The 20th anniversary gala was held on a Friday evening in October in the ground floor event space of Ridgeway's headquarters. Caterers along the west wall, white tablecloths. The project photographs, all of them, had been brought down from the lobby and mounted on easels throughout the room, each one individually lit. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows on the east side, the Allegheny pedestrian bridge was illuminated against the dark river, its cables lit white from below. 200 people filled the space. Walter Price stood at the front. No podium, just a handheld mic and the quiet that settled when he raised it. He kept it short, talked about the company the way a man talks about something he built with his hands. The first crew, the first bid. Then he turned to the bridge photograph on the easel beside him. The man who designed this bridge, every cable, every foundation, every load spec, is standing right over there. He pointed to Adam, near the side wall in a sport coat that still had the price tag crease on the shoulder. This man built the bridge, and this company almost lost him. He handed the mic to Adam without asking. Adam took it. He looked at the room, then at the bridge through the east windows. He talked about the project the way he talked about everything, technically, without performance. The cable stay design, the riverbed sediment challenges, the thermal expansion calculations that had kept him past midnight for 6 straight weeks. He mentioned his engineering team by name. He didn't mention himself. The room was silent, not because the speech was dramatic, because it was precise, and precision delivered without apology has its own gravity. Megan stood at the back, holding a glass she hadn't touched. She watched Adam the way she'd watched him walk construction sites, with the slow recognition that she was seeing someone clearly for the first time. The gala ended past 10. The room emptied slowly. Adam stayed to help carry easels back to the lobby. Megan stayed too. They walked out the east doors together into the October night. The city was quiet. The bridge glowed ahead of them, white cables against black sky, the deck empty. Neither of them suggested walking toward it. They just did. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete, a sound Adam knew from years of inspections. Near the center, he stopped, put his hand on the railing. The steel was cold. His fingers found the seam where 2 sections had been welded, a joint he'd specified in the drawings, executed by a welder named Bill Caffrey, who'd retired the year after the bridge opened. Megan stood beside him. She looked down at the dark water moving underneath them. "I'm restructuring the approval process," she said. "Personnel decisions from mid-level up. I review the file myself before anything gets signed. No more routing through one person's word. No more signing what someone puts in front of me because they say it's urgent." Adam didn't say thank you. Didn't say it was about time. He gave a single nod, the kind that means something has been heard and weighed and accepted. The wind came up off the Allegheny. Not strong, just steady. Megan shifted slightly, her shoulder a fraction closer to his. Not touching, close enough that the warmth between them was something both of them could feel. Adam didn't move, but he didn't step back. Inside the headquarters, through the glass, Jenna stood in front of the project wall. Walter had stayed with her while Adam and Megan walked outside. The bridge photograph was back in its spot. Third from the left, the morning light print. Jenna reached up and touched the bottom edge of the frame. The same gesture, The same careful pressure, as the morning Walter Price had walked into this lobby and asked where her father was. Out on the bridge, the cables hummed faintly above them. A low resonance that only happened at night, when the air temperature dropped and the steel contracted by fractions of an inch. Adam had calculated the thermal coefficient for those cables himself. He knew exactly what the sound was. He'd built this bridge to hold, and it had, through 7 winters, 3 flood stages, and every weight the city had placed on it. Some things stand, not because no one tried to tear them down, but because someone built them to hold.